Hey guys, Mike here with EBR, and today we're looking at the Biktrix Juggernaut Ultra Duo 4. Now that's quite a big name, and when I think of the word Juggernaut, I think of a lot of power and aggression. And when you start to look at the specs of this bike, all that kind of comes together to make sense, because we're talking a 1,000 watt mid-drive motor that puts out 160 Newton meters of torque, which are some of the biggest numbers I've ever seen on an e-bike. So if you're wondering, like me, how this performs, stick around and let's take a better look at the Biktrix Juggernaut Ultra Duo 4. Now, the Juggernaut Ultra Duo 4 is a unrestricted e-bike, meaning there's no speed limit or cap to the speed on this bike, and we've reached speeds in excess of 30 miles an hour, even in excess of 35 miles an hour. But if that puts you uneasy, we always recommend selecting the option at purchase to have it capped at 20 miles an hour, just to kind of get in accordance with your local laws. We were using this out on public lands or city streets where that kind of speed was allowed. But if you get it capped at 20, that kind of takes care of that issue. Now this has a starting MSRP of $2,999, and then once you get into the purchase part, you have a lot of selectable upgrades. So the way we have this kitted out, we have quite a few upgrades. So this one ended up being around $4,800. Now the bike is not UL certified, and it does have a max payload capacity of 380 pounds. And as far as the weight goes, this bike weighs, without the batteries, 75 pounds, the main battery weighing 10.1 pounds, the range extender battery weighing 9 pounds, making the total weight as it sits right here a pretty hefty 94 pounds. So that's something to keep in mind if you're someone who needs to lift your bike often. So now when it comes to frames and tires, there's a couple options that kind of change the bike a little bit. So you have a medium option and a large option for frame sizes, and they're both step-through frames. This is the ST version of the Juggernaut. Now, this has a rider height with the large frame of people for 5'10" and over. Now the medium frame is for riders who are 5'6" and over. So between that 5'6" and up or 5'10" and up, you get to pick between the medium and large. Now one cool feature about this frame in my book is sometimes when we get these step-through frames, they tend to have some flex in them. And while you can't get rid of all the flex, I do think this beefed up bottom crossbar here definitely helped with the rigidity of this, because it has a lot less flex than I've ever felt on a step-through frame. So kudos to them for getting that kind of dialed in. Now, when it comes to color options, you kind of have some endless options here. So there's 5 free colors, which are going to be green, black, blue, dark red, and white. But beyond that, they have another 180 different colors. Yes, that's correct, 180 that you can pick from for a small upgrade fee, but that'll let you pick kind of a custom color, and they sent us one of their kind of flashier yellow custom colors here. But with 180 options, you can kind of pick whatever you want. Now, when it comes to geometry, I'll do the large here. So this large has a wheelbase from rear hub to front hub of 48.8 inches. The seat post height minimum is around 34.5 up to 39.5 of adjustability, so about 5 inches there. Your reach is at 22 inches with the caveat that you can adjust that stem angle a little bit and let your handlebars kind of forward or aft to where you kind of dial in a fit that works best for you. And then the standover height is a nice low 17.7 inches. So if you're somebody with stability concerns, or you want a bike that you can really, like an adventure bike, you can really pack up with a lot of gear, and then still have that nice low stable step over height of just 17.5 inches, this is a really good choice in that department. Now for tires, you have 2 options. You can go 26 by 4-inch tires with a 26-inch wheel, and that they say that's best for bikes who are going to be riding in environments with a lot of snow or sand. Now we are an environment that does not get any snow, so we opted for the 27.5 by 3 inches, and these are Chow Yang tires. The wheels sized at 27.5 inches are a black aluminum alloy with a Quanta rear hub. Now they say they have a recommended tire pressure of around 20 to 25 PSI. We're running right in the middle around 22, and that's been a good balance, especially out here where we can hit some off-road public land trails. And with that suspension and the lower air pressure, it's really a quite comfortable ride, even at very fast speeds, which is pretty fun, and we'll get into that in a bit later. So when it comes to some frame accessories and just some kind of practical perks that come with the bike, there is a rear fender over this one. It's a black alloy fender. And then on top of that, you have a nice rear rack rated for 55 pounds. Now, as far as bringing more gear, you have a couple options there as well. You have mounting points on the down tube. Now, we're currently using those mounting points for the free range extender battery that comes with it. but just know there are some mounting points under there. You also have mounting points up front for a front basket or cargo rack, and then you also have another set of mounting points up on the double A-bar handlebar for like bike bar bags, things like that. So a lot of options to kind of rack on some gear here, and I think that's where this bike really shines. This is something if you're in kind of a traveling lifestyle, or maybe you're retired and travel a lot and you want to kind of just really go out and adventure in those places when you're traveling, this is the kind of bike you can load up, and it can get you pretty much through most places you would want to go, especially with this much power. So lots of mounting options, and I think that's a good fit for an adventure bike like this. Now, on top of that, you also have quite a bit of lighting going on. So in the rear, we have a tail light brake light combo that's wired into the bike. And up front, you have a standard option would be a 200 lumen light, which is already bright and useful. But we opted to go with the 2000 lumen light, and it is a monster light. It's kind of a wide bar, and we'll show you that here in a second, but it's very bright. And in my opinion, that's one of the cooler upgrades on here, aside from that Ren Sports fork, which we'll get into in just a second as well. But just know, front and rear lighting, that's ultra bright and really easy to kind of just navigate nighttime or daytime and be seen just for safety reasons. Then on top of that, they offer a full lineup of accessories. So you have things like a front cargo rack, pannier bags, you can load up the rear rack. They also have pretty typical things like locks, helmets, cell phone holders and bells, all your pretty typical accessories. But waterproof pannier bags are a really solid option for this, because that kind of just lends to its pack it up, gear up, and hit the road. Now, when you talk about the motor and battery on this bike, that's where things get really interesting. So starting things off, you have a Bafang. This is their M620 mid-drive motor that pumps out 1,000 nominal watts, which is already huge, and peaks at 1,500 watts in a mid-drive with a torque sensor. And then it also pumps out 160 Newton meters of torque. Now, those are the biggest numbers I've ever seen on a bike, and you definitely feel it when you start riding this. This is a very powerful bike. And like I said earlier, we reached speeds on this in excess of 35 miles an hour. So very fast, very powerful, and very fun motor. Now, powering this motor is 2 batteries. So you get a standard battery that comes in the frame here, and then they give you a free range extender battery. Now, they're both 52 volts. This main battery is 910 watt hours, and this range extender battery is 884 watts. So you're getting roughly 1,700-ish watt hours, which is a huge number. Now, you might be thinking you get a huge range out of that. The range on this is 45 miles, and at first glance, you might think that's kind of low, but you have to consider a 52 volt system powering this really beefy 1,000 watt mid-drive that peaks at 1,500 watts. It's just a lot of power being used. So you will see 45 miles to be a pretty solid range considering how much power this has. Now, the battery itself does have a warranty. The bike and battery is a warranty of 2 years, but you do have the option when you purchase the bike to get a 4-year warranty for a small upgrade fee, and that may be worth it to some of you guys out there. So speaking of the battery, let's talk about kind of how these are secured in place. So like I said, this is a free range extended battery. It's not there permanently, and it's something you could remove. You can see there's a keyhole here. You can lock it in place, and we've kind of done that. We've just locked it there and left it there because of the 45 mile range. This is something we're always going to keep in place because we always want that full access to the 45 miles. Now, the main battery itself is also locked in place, and either of these you can remove. I'll just remove the main battery to show you how it's done. But essentially, you just take the key, you put it inside, turn it, there's a lever here, you'll push, and that will drop the battery and release it. And you have this 910 beast of a battery, 910 watt hours, and you can put that back, relock the key, and you're good to go. Now, when it comes to components, we're gonna go ahead and start with the drivetrain, and we'll work our way up. Just know that almost every area of the components can be upgraded, except for what I'm gonna start with, which is the Shimano Alivio drivetrain. So like I said, Shimano Alivio drivetrain, it's a 9-speed setup. Up front, you have a 44 tooth chainring mated to an 11 to 34 rear cassette. Now, in my eyes, with all the upgrades you have here, I'd like to be able to upgrade this drivetrain to something a bit beefier, something that can handle the power and torque. Currently, it handles it well. I would just have concerns with this much power and torque putting a lot of wear on this rear cassette and the chain rollers, but that's something we'll just have to see over time. Now, the brakes on this standard are going to be Lee Pro 4-piston on 180 millimeter rotors, and those are really good brakes, and they're hydraulic disc brakes already. We opted to upgrade to the Magura MT5E, which is their e-bike rated brakes, which is also 4-piston calipers, mated to 203 millimeter rotors, and Magura brake levers up top. Now that setup is very, very nice. And if I was to recommend any upgrade when you purchase this, I would definitely say get the Magura brakes. You have a 90-pound bike moving very fast. Having good brakes and modulation is always a good thing to have. But if you opt for the standards, those are also 4 pistons on 180 rotors, so you've got good options either way. So moving up to the saddle, we have a Biktrix branded wide cushion saddle that's also got internal spring support. And the seat post, if you get the standard option, it is just a standard seat post, but we opted for the Canes Creek Thudbuster suspension seat post, and it has, this is the short travel version, but they also offer a Trans-X version and a long travel version for the Thudbuster. So several options for comfort in the seat post area. All I can tell you is between this wide cushy saddle, the springs here, and the Canes Creek suspension saddle, your sit bones will not be upset when you're riding this bike, or at least mine weren't. This is a very comfy ride, especially when you're hitting off-road trails and going fast. This is pretty awesome to have. Now, moving up front. So the standard option is going to be an RST guide fork with 75 millimeters of travel, but we opted for a very nice upgrade, which was the Ren Sports inverted front suspension fork. It has 150 millimeters of travel. It has positive and negative air chamber adjustments, as well as a lockout. And as you can see, it's got plenty of travel, and this fork feels really good off-road. This is something you can rip over 30 miles an hour on rocky gravel trails, and it chews them up on the front end, and your back end is nice and cushy as well. So super comfortable, even at high speeds, off-road, very fun. Now, in addition to that, I talked earlier about this 2000 lumen light. It is on right now. It's a super bright light, and they mount it on this A-bar. Now, this handlebar is an upgrade as well. The standard bar is a 700 millimeter wide flat MTB bar, but we opted for this A-bar because it kind of matches the theme of the bike. This is kind of an adventure bike. You can gear up and kit out, and you can add handlebar bags and hang gear off of here. And it's also got 2 bosses for mounting things on the second bar. So just a really useful, versatile bar that we thought would be a good addition to this bike. Now, both sides have rubber ergonomic grips and Magura MT5E brake levers. On the left here, you have a push throttle, plus your PAS control buttons, your power button, and your headlight button. And over on the right, you have your Shimano Alivio 9-speed trigger shifters with a window to kind of see which gear you're in. Now, overall, the cockpit is pretty clean. I would say you might be able to see here, there's quite a bit of wires that are kind of, they do a good job of like neatly bandaging them up together or bundling them up together with these wraps. But I would say maybe in future releases, I'd like to see maybe these internally routed through the headset or just cleaned up a little bit more, because there's a lot going on. But nonetheless, they don't get away. They don't get in the way of the ride or detract from the ride at all. So just more of a visual curb appeal thing to me. All right, so when you turn on the bike, this is going to be your display's home screen. Now, this display shows on the home screen your current time, your state of charge in numerical percentages, and with a battery bar visual. Here in the center, you've got a meter for your miles per hour or your speed, plus the number itself. And on the right side, that meter shows either a current output or a power output, and you can change that in the advanced settings. It's currently on the current output. Here you've got your trip meter, and below that you've got whichever riding mode you're in. It's currently in eco mode, but if you simply just hold the I button and up button, you will get sport mode, and the same thing to go back. And then each of those having 5 levels of pedal assist within. Now, if you want to get into advanced settings and kind of tweak more things, there's a few options in there as well. So we'll go into those by double tapping the, there it is, double tapping the I button, and then you'll get into display settings. So the first one is units of measurement, so imperial or metric, or miles per hour and kilometers per hour. Then you can get the brightness of the display. Here you can change how long it takes for the bike to auto turn off or auto off, and the max is 9 minutes. The default mode on startup is eco mode, but here if you wanted to be in sport mode when you turn it on, you could simply make that change as well. The next one is going to be that side view of the speedometer. It shows you either current or it can show you power. So you get to choose between current output or power output. Down here you can have the state of charge be in a percentage or in a voltage. You can reset the trip meter. Here you can change your wheel size. So like I talked about earlier, you can opt for a 26-inch wheel. And if you did get that, you could change that right here. Also, another really important factor is there's a lot of choice between either having this unrestricted when it ships or capped at 20. The good news is, regardless of what you choose, you can come back in here and change. So if you got it unrestricted and then you find out it's not allowed in your local area, you could simply go in here and reduce the speed to whatever you want. We're gonna put it at 20 for, actually, let's bump it back up to unrestricted. And you can see it goes as high as, well, it goes high. It says 60, but I don't even think it'll go that fast. So we'll set it to 50 for now. Just know you can completely unrestrict it here or cap it at a certain speed, which is really nice if you have a child, grandkid, or you're just new to the bike and you don't want it to be really zooming around town. You want to take it easy. This is a nice place to control that. Now, AL sensitivity is going to be your headlight and how sensitive it is to the brightness and darkness outside for when it auto turns on and auto turns off if you have that set. And then here you can change the password, set the clock, and then go back. There's one other area you can go into, that's the information area. The first option is going to be your battery info, so you're gonna have your temperatures and your state of charge, and you can go back here. The next option is your error code. So if you're having some problems with the bike and you needed to call for support, here's where you would go to get your error codes. And if you go on the website, they have a manual for this display with a full breakdown of what every code means, which is also nice, and not every brand is doing that, so thanks for that. So that kind of wraps up the display, and as you can see, super simple home screen with all your basic info you're going to want, but the ability to kind of tweak all your settings and kind of dial this in the way you want it. All right, guys, so let's go ahead and take the Biktrix Juggernaut Ultra Duo 4 for a ride. I'm going to do some city streets, and I'm also going to take us out on some of our public lands so we can show you just the speeds and how it performs both on pavement and when you're off-road, and kind of putting all the suspension and comfort to work. So let's hit the road and go. All right, we're out here on the Biktrix Ultra Duo 4 ST, and like we've been saying, the whole theme of this bike is kind of just get out there and explore and have the power to go wherever you want. Currently on public land where we're allowed to have unrestricted vehicles, a lot of dirt bikes and side by restricted. There's no extra fee for that. You can totally do that when you buy it, and you can change it in the display after you bought it. But definitely check with your local laws, because you can easily end up over 30 miles an hour on this bike, and I'm sure your local authorities wouldn't be too pleased. But with that disclaimer out of the way, one thing you notice when you get on this bike is the riding position. So you would expect maybe an aggressive posture, but I actually have like a nice upright, almost cruiser body position. And I think that's a little bit by design. They've got this wide cushion saddle and this kind of sweat back bar. It just lends to an upright, wide field. And more importantly, and even better for me, not leaning over, not hunched over, no lower back strain, just super comfortable and upright. And then when you factor in the Ren Sports upgraded front suspension fork and the Cane Creek Thudbuster suspension seat post, in addition to the wide cushy saddle and 27.5 by 3-inch tires, even on a dirt road going 16, 17 miles an hour, it's just comfortable. Not a lot of shaking in my voice. It's just a nice, smooth ride. The front shock eats up a lot, or suspension fork, it eats up a lot. And it does a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to comfort for you. Now, this 1,000-watt motor does have a little bit of noise to it. When I pedal, you can kind of hear it a little bit. That's a really rough spot. But I would say for 1,000 watts, this isn't meant to be some super quiet, you know, tame e-bike. This is a bike that was built to have a whole lot of power, and it does. And I'm sure that comes at the cost of a little bit more motor whine than we're used to seeing. I will say it's not loud or overbearing, but it's just, you know, some of the newer bikes you hear almost nothing, and this one you can just hear it like you would expect from an e-bike. So not a ding on it, it's just not silent. So we upgraded the brakes as well, so we have these 4-piston Magura MT5Es. They're fantastic 4-piston calipers, super good at stopping. Let's just get up to a little bit of speed here and then hit the brakes. And we're gonna hit this in loose gravel. So 22.5, 3, 2, 1. I mean, that's from 23 miles an hour to a dead stop, I don't know, in a couple seconds. It's pretty cool. And the modularity and the wall on these brakes, they just feel really good. Like you could do a super controlled stop. I mean, I never have anything bad to say about Magura brakes. They're just nice. But we're getting close to some pavement. So let's see how this thing feels on pavement. Because off-road, it does a great job. And really, if you're a traveler or RVer and you load up your bikes when you camp, or maybe you're scouting public land for hunting, or who knows, this is the kind of like all-terrain, get you anywhere e-bike that will let you really just go back deep into these public lands without tearing them up. You know, this is, like, if you look at the start on this, I'm gonna go ahead and do an acceleration test, and I'm gonna preface it with what I feel. And I've been noticing when I do this, when I first got this, I would blast the accelerator and I was expecting a blast off the line, like most electric vehicles, low end torque. But I think they geared it back a little bit for a more subtle acceleration by design, because on a mid drive, the weak point's gonna be your chain, because it's sending power and torque to the chain ring, and the chain is ultimately gonna turn that rear sprocket and wheel. So I think if they had a full blast of power, we'd rip chains and drivetrains off. But let's just do a quick acceleration and you'll see what I'm talking about. So not slow. I mean, we're already at 10, 12, 20. So that was really fast. And it keeps going. So we're about at 29 there. Cattle guard. Pop. And still, I mean, just raw speed, man. This thing just goes. I mean, you could literally just drive this as your commuter to your job. It's got street speed and it's got off-road capability. Super fun to ride around on, and I really enjoyed it. So let's go talk to Ben, get his mechanic thoughts on it, and then I'll wrap this video up. All right, guys, welcome back. This is the part where we pull Ben out of his workshop and ask him to kind of give his thoughts on the bike, specifically today, the Juggernaut Ultra Duo 4ST. Ben, I'm gonna get out of your way, but before I do, I just want to say thank you to Feedback Sports for supplying us with their Pro HD aluminum rack, lightweight, super stable, even with this 94-pound bike in it, and they have a whole lineup of tools. If you like to tinker on your bike, I'll put a link down in the description. Ben, I'm gonna get out of your hair here, but could you start by telling us the things you like about the Juggernaut Ultra Duo 4?
All right, thanks, Mike. There's a lot to like about this. I'll, as usual, go from the front of the bike to the back and explain why. This fork is a huge upgrade. This inverted fork from Ren Cycles has 2 air chambers. What that means to you and any rider is you can pump air into a positive chamber and down below from a negative air chamber, so you can exactly adjust how your fork feels. That's a big upgrade. You rarely see dual chamber air forks these days. I met the guy a couple of years ago that owns Ren at the Long Island Mountain Bike Festival. Super nice guy, doing a great job in the industry. Secondly, I like the big through axle. I always do, especially with a fork this big. It just makes the front end a lot stiffer. Couple that with, or partner with it rather, again, with a tapered steer tube. So the front end of this bike, as much power as this thing is cranking out, with this much stiffness on the front end, you almost have to, but it sure does feel nice pulling it out of the box with that much attention paid to it. I love the brakes, 4-piston Maguro brakes. There's a lot of stopping power. Not immediate stopping power. The way Maguro works is it's a very controlled, strong stopping power. Again, 4 pistons, big brake blade, easy to pull, just feels awesome. Moving back on the bike, this is a Bafang motor, so I will make note of the oversized ISIS style bottom bracket. Again, with this much power, this big of a stance, it sure is nice to see something that robust, beefy, and almost more of a, it's hard to call it an industry standard, but for bikes like this, it should be. I like the really nicely machined thick aluminum chain guide and guard. So this just means your chain won't fall off of the sprocket when you're out there pedaling around. Nobody wants messy hands after all if you drop your chain. Again, with the power, this thing's got a ton of it, especially with the second battery. You can go farther for longer. That's a really cool thing. The frame looks to be compatible. These are 27.5-inch wheels, which are great. It's perfect for a guy my size. But the frame is built big enough so that you can, and the fork as well, upgrade to a 29-inch wheel. And what that means to you as a rider, with a bigger wheel, you have better rollover, speed bumps, cats, dogs, that sort of thing. It just tends to go over things a little easier. Kidding about the pets, of course. One other thing, a lot of people won't notice that, but the wheels are built with an offset spoke lacing pattern. What that means is the spokes are not down the center of the rim like most other bikes. They're out to the edges. So what that means is you've got a wider stance for the strength of the spokes. So it's just gonna feel really nice when you're out there 25, 30 miles per hour, going through curbs, gutters, just having a good time. It just is very confidence inspiring. Doesn't feel soft or flexible. I also do like the suspension seat post from Cane Creek. Anytime you get a linkage style suspension post, it just feels nice, and it doesn't really help with traction. Those suspension seat posts really make it so that it's easier on your tailbone and your back while you're out riding. It's a people suspender, not a bicycle suspender. Really great to see on a bike like this.
Awesome, man. And what kind of things would you improve?
You know, Mike, what I recommend first is some lock-on grips. This bike is nice enough, and I think for the price, rather than just some press-on rubber grips that are probably going to kind of degrade in sunlight or something, get a nice lock-on grip so you never have any kind of throttling. One thing that I think would do this bike better is because of the massive amount of power, and I do love this bike because of the power, but to have a quick release rear axle on this, I wish it was a through bolt, just like the front. Why do I wish that? A through bolt, what that does is helps keep the shifting and the brakes in exact alignment. Okay, so if you're out riding the bike and your quick release lever slips, then all of a sudden your wheel is sitting diagonal in the frame. That means your brake is going to rub. That means your shifting is going to be off. And with this much power, it seems like that would be a good idea. Just match it to the fork. Along those lines, I think with a bike with this many upgrades, the one thing I would recommend they consider is a more robust chain and a derailleur. With this much power, again, you've got a chain on here that it just seems to skip a little bit more, and what's going to happen with that skipping, it's going to wear out quicker. And also with the rear derailleur from Shimano, once you dip into the lower tier of rear derailleurs from Shimano, they start using softer aluminums. The way that they produce them isn't as strong as others. The lower cage is just stamped steel, so it does flex a lot. So when you've got this thing up to full power and you're really trying to go fast, if this flexes in the back, which it can tend to do, again with this much power, it's just going to skip. So you've got excessive chain wear or quicker chain wear, skipping drivetrain. It just doesn't feel as awesome as it could with a tougher, better built chain. The kickstand on this one, I'm not a big fan of its placement. I wish it was in the back like some bikes do, because once it's down, if you back the bike up, rolling it backwards, the pedal all of a sudden hits the kickstand, and then you're not able to back the bike up anymore. Most people won't have a problem with that, but here in our warehouse, we've got a few bikes, so backing them up is kind of a critical point. The last thing that I'll touch on is the steel fenders here again. They just make noise, and when they dent, they stay dented. When they bend, they stay bent. I just would prefer some plastic fenders. And I guess lastly, I'll just be picky, is because we have a suspension seat post on this, I don't feel like there's an extra need for a spring seat. It is very comfortable, there's no doubt about that, but you're doing two things to accomplish one smooth ride, and I feel like the way it looks, it could just do away with the springs underneath the seat, but that's just me being picky, so not that big of a deal. That's all I've got, Mike.
All right, awesome, man. Thanks again for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, so let's wrap this up. The Biktrix Juggernaut Ultra Duo 4. Like I said when I opened this is the most power I've ever seen on an e-bike. And as you saw when we went out on a ride, it's super fun to ride and it can handle quite a bit in the great outdoors. Now, if you're somebody who's thinking about traveling and you really want to go adventure on your trips and really get into the backcountry and go places with some comfort that you couldn't get on a regular bike or other e-bike, the Biktrix Juggernaut Ultra Duo 4, especially at this step-through frame, nice firm frame, it's a really solid choice. And with all the upgrade options, you can really go as mild or as wild as you want. But at the end of the day, this is a fast, fun, capable bike that you can really gear out and just hit the road and go explore. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this review. If you haven't done so already, consider liking and subscribing to our channel, and I'll see you guys in the next video.